UCT Associate Professor Richard Calland is withdrawn from the panel that will look into President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala Farm saga. He's been replaced by senior advocate Mahlape Sello, whom you may remember, of course, as an evidence leader in the state capture inquiry. And it comes after objections by opposition parties that Calland would be biased towards the president, having spoken or written favorably about him in the past as a political commentator. Calland, of course, rejected those claims and said he would have acted without fear or favor as part of that three-person panel. But he's nonetheless made the decision to accept being removed, and he joins us now on the line. I appreciate your time this morning, and I must declare up front, as I have said before, that I thought the objections were grandstanding and unfair. What did you make of them?
Yes, thank you, Bongani. Very good morning to you, and thank you for having me on. I did think they were unfair. I thought they were unreasonable, and therefore they did not meet the standard set by the recusal test, which is in two parts. Firstly, are you biased? Am I biased in this case? Secondly, is there a reasonable apprehension of bias? Now, on the basis of what I was given by Parliament, by the Speaker, a summary, in effect, of the EFF's complaint or objection, I did not conclude that that was a reasonable basis for saying that there was an apprehension of bias, because the articles they referred to, the statements I've made, were A, a long time ago, B, out of context in some cases, and thirdly, failed to take into account the fact that I've also been critical of the president. And indeed, the one thing I've written about Phala Phala was on the 31st of August, when the president failed to account for it in Parliament. And I wrote a piece for the Mail and Guardian heavily criticising him for failing to honour his constitutional duty to account to Parliament.
Is there an equivalence here? Because part of what people have been arguing in terms of why they didn't think you should be a part of this is that what's to stop us then from, let's say, having judges talking publicly about parties, politicians, whomever they support and which ones they do not, and then, of course, decide their fate? I mean, is there an equivalence there, do you think?
Well, there is. It's certainly analogous. One of the reasons why judges are discouraged from making public statements about issues or from appearing on television programs and writing comment pieces and such like is because that issue may come before them as a judge. And if it's seen that they've got a kind of closed mind on the matter or offered a strong opinion on the matter, then they might not be best suited to judge it. And similarly, if I had written something or said something saying that, for example, I thought Ramaphosa was clean, that he'd got nothing to hide, that everything was absolutely hunky-dory with Phala Phala, then that would have been a problem, but I hadn't. And so that's why I concluded that I was not biased and there was no reasonable apprehension of bias. However, as you know, Bongani, in my statement, I made it absolutely clear, and in my letter last week to the Speaker, that if she thought otherwise, or if indeed the controversy over my appointment was going to in any way get in the way of the process, then the process should come first. And my commitment to constitutional democracy and public accountability is such that I did not want that to be the case. And that's why I made it clear to her I'd be happy to step aside, to use a phrase, to recuse myself from the process. And that's where we're at.
Is it your sense that for some opposition parties and maybe others, there's only going to be one acceptable outcome on this process or from this process, and that is, of course, the recommendation to impeach?
Well, yes, and now I'm, as it were, liberated to speak freely on the matter as a commentator once again. I can say that the skin in the game that they have is that this is, I think, the one kind of thing they have against the president. This is their one opportunity to damage him. And so his opponents, both inside the ANC and outside the ANC and in other parties, are kind of clinging on to this like a life raft, because it's their one opportunity to really dent his credibility. And indeed, his credibility has been dented by it, because he's chosen not to bring the public into his confidence over what happened at Phala Phala. So therefore, the opposition has to make the most of it, and I understand why. Therefore, they would politically, from a partisan point of view, want to push as hard as possible to try and get the outcome that they politically need.
Has the Speaker gone about this the right way? The DA would have preferred an ad hoc committee.
Well, I think the process is very clear in the rules that there should be this first line of inquiry. And the task of the Section 89 panel, chaired by former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo, is to review the evidence, such as it is, and to advise Parliament on whether the full impeachment process should proceed by Parliament, with Parliament. That seems to me to be a sensible process. It's worked well for the Public Protector impeachment process, and it should be allowed to now proceed. And I wish Parliament and the panel all the best with that process.
All right, we'll leave it there. Professor Richard Calland, Associate Professor in Public Law at the University of Cape Town. The panel, of course, will have 30 days to complete its probe and submit a report to the Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.